And a lot of times, guys, it's only by, maybe an inch or two that they're cheating on this mat. People probably violate this rule thousands of times a day. And then all of a sudden, we get that one mistake that's made. You get somebody across a difference of potential and they touch that conductor and it's over.
Okay, today we are speaking with Mike Bahr, owner of Castle Rock Safety Consultants. Mike brings over 4 decades of experience in the electrical field to his presentations and programs to help people avoid the pain and suffering of workplace injury to electrical workers. Mike has dedicated his career to the development of safety training programs for both private industry and government clients. He's developed and presented personal protective grounding and arc flash training courses around the world, and is a formal principal member of NFPA 70E committee. Mike, welcome to the show.
Thanks. It's great to be here with you guys. I'm looking forward to this.
Awesome. We've been looking forward to speaking with you for quite a while now. So just to kind of get things rolling, can you give us a bit of background on how you got started in the electrical trade? A lot of people find that interesting, just how somebody gets started, and then we can kind of go from there.
You bet. I graduated from high school in 1973, and I grew up in southeast Idaho, and not too far from the Department of Energy nuclear testing site. And at the time, I was debating whether to go to college. I really didn't know what I was going to do with myself. So I took a little bit of time after high school and just kind of played around a bit. But I eventually decided my mother at the time worked for the division manager, maintenance manager at this nuclear site. It's a big site. It's like a city. It's got its own generating facilities, and it's got distribution and transmission and anyway, I went to work out there. She got me a job, and went to work out there as a laborer. And at the time, my brother-in-law, he was an electrician. He was an IBW electrician, and so. Eventually there became an apprenticeship opening for the electrical trade, and I applied for and got that apprenticeship, and worked my way through an apprenticeship, and I also I watched the guys out on the poles, the line crew doing work, and I thought, that looks like a fun thing to do too. So I eventually took out a second apprenticeship and apprenticed as a lineman. And so I started out, of course, doing inside wiring, and eventually ended up on the line crew, and did that for a number of years. So that's where I got most of my electrical experience. And I got experience in just about every aspect of the electrical system, from basically residential up to transmission and everything in between. So that's how I got my start.
Sounds great, Mike. And was there a distinct point that you can remember of when safety became the thing for you?
Well, yeah. Actually, I was, of course, back then, back in the 70s and 80s, we didn't have, OSHA was just getting started, and there just wasn't a whole lot out there. And, that's back in the day. In fact, the guy that trained me, really a neat guy, he was one of these guys that used to test for voltage with his fingers, so that was a long time ago when we didn't have a lot of respect for that. And I had never really heard that much or had been exposed to anything called arc flash. I don't even think those terms were used back then. Every electrician that I knew had experienced some kind of of flash, like burning the end of a screwdriver off. And of course, every one of us had a pair of side cutters in our pouch that had a little notch in it that was just right for stripping wire now, because you had burned a little hole in it. And that's really all I knew until one day I was working in a facility, and I had a panel cover off, 480 277 volt panel cover, and I made a mistake, and I shouldn't have been in there while it was energized anyway, but that's what we did. And it takes too long to lock out, so I was in this panel, and I shorted one of the circuits out, and there was an arc flash, and it was significant. It ignited my shirt, started it on fire. It burned my hands, my ears, my face, and knocked me to the ground. And that was my first real, awakening, if you will, at some of what we do is dangerous, and I remember thinking about that a lot. And of course, I got disciplined for that, because I had been in a panel board when it was energized, and I should have locked it out, even though probably if I'd have asked to get it locked out, I'd have probably been told no, But anyway, that got me thinking about stuff, and I tried to be more careful. I tried to do things, and I was one of these guys that really didn't have a lot of respect for safety guys. I really didn't. I just thought they were a nuisance, and they didn't know our business. They didn't know what we did, and I didn't give them a lot of respect. Even after this happened to me, there was a couple of them that tried to talk to me about what happened, and I just dismissed pretty much everything they said. And then about a year later, a guy that worked in a different shop than I was in a substation, and they were working in some 2400 volt switchgear, and they caused an arc flash, and this guy received about an 80% third degree burn. He was life flighted down to Salt Lake, and he survived it, but he's lived he's had a pretty rough life. And that really shook me up, and I started to put some pressure on the company I said, we need to do things a little bit different. We need to get some procedures and some things in place. And the more I pushed them, the more they basically asked me to help them. And so I started, and of course, this is back before we had the internet, right? So I tried to gather as much information as I could, and I actually ran across the first edition of NFPA 70E, and that was developed back in the late 70s, and so I took that document and I started to put programs together, and the more I did that, the more I was getting relied on to help with some of the other facilities. And of course, who I was working for was a contractor for the Department of Energy. And so I started doing training. People started asking me, and pretty soon some of the other facilities around the Department of Energy started asking me to come help them with their programs. And one thing just kind of led to another. And before I knew it, I was running the Department of Energy's electrical safety program. And they named me as a principal investigator. And gosh, it just took off, and I've been doing it ever since. And eventually I applied for and got accepted on the committee. I only did that for a few years, and there's a story behind that. But anyway, I got a lot of exposure to different people and different things, and yeah, it's just been a wonderful career. And I've taught arc flash all over the world. I've been to Kazakhstan and in Russia and Sri Lanka, Cameroon. It's just taken me all over the place, and I've learned a ton. So that's how I got started.
For how many years have you been in the trade?
Well, I started in '74 is when I got my apprenticeship. So we're damn near up to 50 years now. So I've been at it a long time.
Mm-hmm. So I guess the question I had when you were telling that story, the time between the incidents, the one that you said that really shook you up, the guy that received the 80% burns, when was that? Was that still kind of the era where people didn't really even know what arc flash was, or?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Yeah, that probably would have been early 80s, 82, 83, somewhere around there. And I mean, when that happened, I mean, it just stunned everybody. I mean, you got to see the pictures, the inside of this substation, what it did to that switchgear, and I mean, it literally destroyed the building. Everything in that building was just incredible, and it really shook people up, and it opened a lot of eyes because nobody really had any kind of a concept of arc flash, and the fact that it hadn't ever happened before, I think, was probably remarkable. And and over the years, there's been a few other things that happened there before I left the Department of Energy, but that was a big one, and it not only shook up that particular facility, but it rippled through the entire Department of Energy, and everybody really started to look at their programs, and I don't know, I was one of those that just kind of I was the one that stood up and said, we got to fix this, and we can't have this kind of stuff happen, and so because I was the one that stood up and said, no more. Let's fix it. That's how I got started. I was the squeaky wheel, I guess. So.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No. So I guess so. Now you've kind of you found yourself as a bit of an electrical safety arc flash trainer. I know some of your courses you have listed as protective grounding and things like that. Where is your main focus today? Like, is it a certain group of workers that you're focused on helping, or is it really anybody?
Mostly today, I still do some arc flash training. I still do some of that, but mostly my focus is on the utility side these days. On the utility side, it's just still astounding to me how many fatalities and how many incidents that we're having. I know you guys. You can go onto a lot of sites and start looking up the statistics for how many arc flash incidents. You guys, I'm sure, know arc flash is I don't want to use the wrong words here, but it's getting way much more attention when it comes to electrical safety than it should. And I know that sounds, but we've got a lot more people being electrocuted than we do getting exposed, to arc flash. And you can go online and you can find statistics all over the internet that will tell you that we're literally killing thousands of people a year. 2,000 to 3,000 people a year are dying from arc flash, and it's just simply not true. Mm-hmm. It's just not. And when it comes to arc flash, everything is about clothing. Everything's about PPE. It's just and that should be the last thing we talk about. But yet that's where the industry has gone. And like I said, I don't want to say the wrong thing here, but there's just a tremendous amount of money to be made in that area, mm-hmm. And I think we've really lost focus So anyway, I do arc flash training, but I'm primarily focusing on the utility side. We're having I think right now we're averaging about every 11 to 15 days we have some type of a SIF, a serious injury or fatality. People are making contact. People are I don't know, but. And there's a lot of reasons for that. There's a lot of issues out there, but that's where I primarily have been focusing my efforts is on the utility side with the high voltage guys.
Do they have the same more attention to arc flash in the utility world than shock? Is it similar?
No, they don't. And one of the things I'm finding too, guys, is that there's a tremendous amount of misunderstanding about arc flash on the utility side. People are heavily focused on NFPA 70E on the utility side, and 70E typically really doesn't apply to the utility side of the service point. It's primarily for premise wiring. Arc flash on the utility side, we have requirements out of 1910-269 that require us, of course, to assess the workplace, determine if anybody's doing work that could expose them to it, and then we have to do an estimate. Anyway, it's calculated different. We typically don't use IEEE 1584 to calculate the arc flash on the utility side. It's there's other methods, but one of the things I'm finding on the utility side is there's very, very little of the assessment going on. People are they're just assuming that I can put clothing on people and they'll be protected. In other words, not too long ago, I went into a substation out in Texas, and I saw some guys out there that were hanging grounds on a de-energized bus, and they had a 40-calorie suit on with a hot stick in their hands and class 4 gloves, and it's de-energized, right? And when I start asking people why they're doing what they're doing, they really don't know. It's just that people are, rather than, and this is the problem with arc flash on the utility side and everywhere really, we're more focused on the regulation than we are the hazard. We're not taking the time to really address the hazard. We're just throwing the PPE out there. And in most situations, I think most people will be protected, like these guys in the substation. They're obviously not going to get burned with that 40-calorie suit on and those class 4 gloves, even if there were to be. But in reality, their exposure is probably minimal, if at all. Even if it was an energized bus, if you were to do the proper assessment, the incident energy at the level that they're at from where that arc would take place, they're probably under a calorie, but yet we got them in a 40-calorie suit. So that's a little frustrating to me that we're just so heavily focused on the PPE and we're ignoring the actual hazard assessment.
So would you say it's fair, and going back to, you mentioned 11, every 11 to 15 days, there's a serious incident fatality. But you're thinking that, taking these guys in Texas, you mentioned, who don't really even understand maybe why they're wearing the PPE. You think that correlates back to the SIFs that are happening? Is that the people that are finding themselves in these situations, that they just don't understand how to assess the risk, and the risk might not even be arc flash, it might be shock hazard? Is that kind of what you're...
I think there's some of that. When I look at all these fatalities that happen, the majority of them are contacts with overhead lines. You've got people that are violating their MAD distances. And one of the things that I've watched for many years in our industry on the utility side is we continue to have these line contacts. It's always been when the majority of the fatalities on the utility side has always been line contact. And so years and years ago, what we started to do was the thought was, well, maybe the MAD distance isn't appropriate. Maybe we need to extend that MAD distance out. So I remember clearly back 20, 30 years ago, we started writing our rules that rather than like on 12470, when you got a couple of feet of MAD, we said, okay, we're going to extend that out to 5 feet. So in other words, if you get closer than 5 feet, you're going to put your gloves and sleeves on. Well, things still happened, because, if a lineman will not follow the MAD rules the way they're written, what makes people think they're going to do it at 5 feet? In fact, they're going to be less likely to put those gloves and sleeves on at 5 feet, in my view. Mm-hmm. And so that didn't work. And so what we did eventually, and it's very common now, you hear about ground to ground, cradle to cradle, lock to lock. So now we've got MAD rules that you can't even leave the cradle in that bucket until your gloves and sleeves are on. But yet we still have people making contact. So I've always believed it's not the rules that are the problem. We just have people that get too comfortable and we get complacent. There's a lot of pride involved. People are arrogant. We have people that won't step up and use their stop work authority. And it's a big problem, and I'm not sure exactly how we fix it all, but to me, it's just I just keep talking to people. I just keep trying to convince people that it's just not worth it to try to inch closer and closer without wearing this equipment. And when you're in, South Texas and it's August and the heat index is 118 degrees, people, they want to cheat, and it's getting people killed.
Mike, could you unabbreviate MAD and describe how it works or how it should work to keep people safe?
Well, of course, MAD stands for minimum approach distance. And, minimum approach to, when you look at, OSHA gives us if you're unqualified, OSHA gives us a distance that an unqualified person has to maintain for an overhead line. And that is what, typically that's 10 feet. And then, of course, as the voltage increases, that distance gets greater. But if you're a qualified person, and anybody that works on or near energized lines and equipment that fall under 1910-269 or subpart V, which is the construction standard, you have to be qualified. You've got to be a qualified person. So if you're qualified, I can work closer than that 10 feet, and I can work up to MAD distance, minimum approach distance, which is a calculated boundary that is based off of there's several factors, but mainly it's the distance that an arc or voltage can. It's the arcing distance, which is 10,000 volts per inch. Plus, you've got this adder in there that includes reach, right? And so, when you think about it, a lot of these incidents that are happening at distribution voltage, 12,470, 13,000, and the MAD distance is just a couple of feet, about 27 inches. So that's and OSHA says I can work at that MAD distance without any personal protective equipment. So in other words, I can be within 2 feet, of 12,470. Well, 2 feet's pretty damn close, and and so the thought is, well, if I extend that out, right, to 5 feet or ground to ground, then they're going to have their gloves and sleeves on before they even get up there. Unfortunately, that's not happening. So, but that's what mad distance is. It's just a boundary at which you can work safely. As long as you don't get inside that boundary, then it's considered safe.
So the question that I have is, like I was thinking as you were telling this, that they were assuming that these lines were de-energized, so that's why it was safe not to wear their PPE. But oftentimes the lines are energized.
Oh yes, they're all, yeah, they know they're energized.
Okay.
Yeah, they do.
So
yeah,
they know they're energized, and they're still
correct
enough not to wear. Wow.
That's correct. Yeah, there's hey, we've got some of the best. When you look at the utility side, these are smart people. They're extremely well trained and competent people, but they're also it's so easy to get complacent. Our trade, it's really easy to cheat on some of these rules and without any negative consequences. People can get in a bucket and work at height without a harness on over and over and over again, and there's no negative consequence. People can get within a foot of that line, and there's no negative consequence because you got to touch it, right? And it's not you literally have to touch that line. And of course have your elbow or your shoulder or something else across in contact with a difference of potential, but there's no negative consequences generally of violating that mad distance, and so we get very comfortable. The people on the ground watching it get very comfortable watching people do it. That we do it over and over and over again. And a lot of times, guys, it's only by, maybe an inch or two that they're cheating on this mad. But it's again, you can do it. People probably violate this rule thousands of times a day across the country. And then all of a sudden, we get that one mistake that's made, and you get somebody across a difference of potential, and they touch that conductor, and it's over. It's happening way too much.
So, Mike, it sounds that there's no problem with the rules. The rules are in place. There's no
Correct.
problem with availability of personal protective equipment. But it sounds that it's the risk tolerance. Personal risk tolerance is way
Correct.
too high, and it leads to these unfortunate incidents and fatalities.
Correct.
So
Yes.
for new people coming into the trade, what can you recommend? What would the suggestion be? How to avoid that pitfall of complacency and high risk tolerance?
Well, I think that what I try to do is, people have to understand clearly, obviously what the rules are and how they apply to their work. People have to understand the consequences, and they do. This is what's so frustrating, Victor, is that there's hardly a lineman out there that doesn't know somebody who's gone through this, or doesn't know somebody, a relative or a friend or another company. Everybody understands this. They see it all the time. They hear about it constantly. It's just constantly, brought out and talked about. But yet, and I think another thing is that, especially on the contractor side, especially on the construction side, not so much with on the utility side, but on the construction side, production is number one. And look, I tell people I hate it when I see policies and signs. Everybody says safety is number one. Safety is our number one priority. The hell it is. Making money is our number one priority. That's why we're here. That's why these companies exist, is to make a profit. But you can't do that when you're hurting people. So we've got to get to a point where people understand that the safety is a value. It is not something that can be negotiated. It's not something that can be overlooked. I think that we've got a lot of supervision out there that lets things slide, that see things, that are aware of things out there, and they just let it go because we just get too comfortable doing things the way we do them. And but these young guys coming in, I think, honestly, I think that a lot of these guys coming in are a little bit better, especially when they come out of trades. They come out of the line colleges and some of these trade programs. I think they're getting it a little bit better. The problem is that the longer they're out there, the easier for them it is to become accustomed to just what the culture is. And that's what it's all about, guys, is culture. Culture drives everything we do. Every decision that's made, if a guy can violate MAD, he does that because the culture allows him to do it. If you got a lineman up in a bucket and he knows that if he violates MAD distance, in other words, if we've got a cradle to cradle rule and there's a guy up in that air without his gloves and sleeves on and he gets away with it, the culture's allowing that. Mm-hmm. And that's the problem is we just are not very good at some of our businesses of establishing the proper culture because it's too, and I know people are going to get upset when I say it. Money drives it, and we gotta do things different. It's just not worth it to take these shortcuts. And I don't understand. I really don't. I don't understand why we allow this stuff to continue. And I just feel like we just haven't gotten to the point yet where we've put people ahead of profits. Because if we did, this stuff would stop. It would stop.
Yeah, so that kind of, you talk about culture, and that's something that I know we spend a lot of time thinking about and discussing in other conversations. If you imagine that you today were put in charge of a new crew, or you just started working at, how would you think about changing that culture? What are some of the things that you would want to see put in place? Maybe some of the things, if you were actually the supervisor, that you would go look for to make sure that the crew has or that they have access to, just for those people out there who might be in charge of a crew today, or maybe they just started it. What's some of the things they can be thinking about to improve that safety culture?
Well, I think there's a couple of basics, of course. Is first of all, obviously we have to make sure that people know what's expected of them. And I think one of the things that we're deficient in is that, I'm not saying that they don't understand the rules. I think most people out there have a pretty good understanding of what the company policies are, what the OSHA rules are. But I think a supervisor needs to make sure, supervisor's got to build trust. He's got to be trusted. We don't have enough leaders out there. We got supervisors and we got foremen. But just because you are in power doesn't mean you're a leader, you know. And you've got to have people that are tough but caring. You know, you got to care about your people, and they have to understand what's expected of them. And if you are making sure that they understand what's expected, and you're doing the proper job briefings, and you have people that understand that stop work is something that you not only they have the authority but the responsibility, and you know, so there's a lot of pieces there, but to me it's just you know, we're not holding people accountable. Not only is the supervisor sometimes not holding their guys accountable, but management isn't holding those supervisors accountable. There's got to be accountability, and I think that again, some of the most successful, you know, supervisors that I've seen are those that truly care about their people more than they do about getting that job done. And now obviously the job's got to get done. We have to we got to move things along, especially on the construction side. But there just can't be any ambiguity about what is required to get that job done safely. And I just don't think we have enough of that.
And Mike, where would they find the information about how to drive that knowledge forward and establish those accountability points?
Well, you know, obviously, these are things that you know, I've got a leadership class that I teach. I've got about a 4-hour class on how to become a safety leader, right? And I go through a lot of this stuff, and I talk about what it takes to be, you know, a good leader. And you know, we discuss a lot of things. Some of the reasons why people won't speak up. Why isn't stop work authority used? You know, and I can take people through all that. There's all kinds of courses, and there's places that you can find all this stuff. But until a person makes that commitment, you know, to change that, and truly believe that the people that he's in charge of are you know, more important than the work, and making sure that they get home safely. I don't know that that's necessarily something that can be taught. You know, that I can have you go through a class, and now all of a sudden you're that tough, caring safety leader that we need. You know, I think that sometimes we don't do a good job of selecting our leaders, you know, we tend to select the ones that are going to get the work done, right? The ones that are driven to get the work done. And I'm not saying that they can't be the leaders as well, but sometimes they're not good with people. You know, they're good at building power lines, but they're not good with people. They're not true leaders. And man, I'll tell you what, if you go in there and you're not honest, and you're not you're not this caring leader, the guys are not going to respond very well to you. And I see a lot of that out there, where there's just a lot of politics going on. There's a lot of contention on these crews, and a lot of different personalities. And so, yeah, you got to have the right people in place. And I think that's where you start, is you do a little bit better job. And another thing, you know, we'll take a guy and make him a foreman, and we don't give him any tools to do that from a safety standpoint. Sure, we teach them all the rules, but we don't teach them. We don't guide them. We don't give them the information they need to be a leader. and we just send them out there and say, okay, you're in charge.
But maybe he was on the crew the longest. Wouldn't that make him a great leader?
Well, maybe, and maybe not. Maybe not. Yeah. So, yeah. I don't know. It's just I've been doing this a long time, guys, and I just have not seen a lot of things. Now, some companies get it. Sometimes people are dialed in. I remember years ago I went out to a steel plant in Texas, Nucor actually, and I was doing a whole week of arc flash training for this steel facility. And I get to the guard gate, and the guy that meets me, I walk in the guard gate and I'm signing in, and there's a guy sitting there in the chair, and he stands up and comes over to me, and he's got a suit and tie on, very, very well dressed, and it's the president of this division of Nucor Steel. And that had never happened to me before. I'd never been met by the president of the company. And he comes and he takes me to his office, and he sits down and goes through, tells me, he's been there for 4 or 5. They were about to shut this plant down because of the incidents that they were having. They'd had some fatalities. They'd had some arc flash incidents. And he came in and took over. And they had gone several years without a recordable. I don't even think they'd had a first aid. And it was really clear that this guy got it, and day one, he came in and he sat his whole management team down and said, okay, this is the way things are going to work. And if you get on board, great. If not, there's the door, and he said he had to get rid of some people, and what was really remarkable about this is this guy attended my class. And he told me that every class that his guys go through, he goes through as well. And it showed his commitment, and he turned it around. And that's what it takes, guys. You gotta, and it's hard to do. It's really hard to do. Mm-hmm. It takes a lot of commitment. It takes a tremendous amount of effort. But you can change that culture, and that's what it takes. You've got to. You can't just tell them what the rules are and walk away. It's not that easy. So you got to spend time with them. You have to, yeah.
Well, you said it. I mean, that is what leadership is, and what you describe maybe not to be doing is what I would call positional leadership. That's not my term, but you're in the position, so everyone just has to listen to you. Versus. Correct. Actually taking the time and showing everyone kind of what's expected. And no, that's a great. I think that's probably a great place to wrap things up. We'll kind of end on that note. Give everybody a good example of how to do it right. Mike, is there a certain place if someone wanted to reach out to you and maybe take a look at that leadership course that you've got, or some of the other training? Is it probably your LinkedIn profile the best place to get a hold of you? Or
yeah, they can look me up on LinkedIn. I do have a website, castlerocksafety.com. It's there's not much there, but there's a way they could get a hold of me through there, or just email me, mwbahr, BAHR at gmail.com. So, I'm trying to retire, but I don't know. I don't think it's going to happen. I feel like there's more I can do, and I just keep going. I do work. I work for IEA. We build renewables, wind and solar, mm-hmm. And so I work for them, but I'm not totally full time with them.
Yep.
So I do my consulting as well, and at some point, I think probably within the next year or two, I'll be consulting full time again. But as long as I can keep doing it, I think I'm gonna keep doing it. I think I got something to say, and I think I can help people, and so I think I'm gonna keep after it.
It makes a big difference. Thank you, Mike. Thank you for your commitment
Yeah.
and safety message.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys.